Why did I leave the Hasselblad for you, huh? You're never gonna be as good as her. Never.
Hi, this is a waste of film. Today we're going to be looking at possibly the worst decision I've ever made and easily the worst purchasing decision I've ever made. It is the Fujifilm GX680 III S Professional, and it is the absolute epitome of bigger is not always better. So some boring shit first. The history of this camera starts in 1986 with the release of the first generation, the Fujifilm GX680 I. The second generation came out in 1995, and the third generation, which this is a part of, came out in 1997. This is actually the S version of the camera, which means it is lacking the front tilt and shift movements on the front lens boards. That's right, this camera had front tilt and shift movements for God knows what reason, because it's not a large format camera. The support for this camera continued all the way up until 2010, which explains why Fujifilm didn't come out with any good DSLRs in the mid-2000s, because it was supporting a dying analog community of medium format photographers. Because of the extremely long lineage of this family of cameras, there is an absolute ton of accessories for it as well. An incredible amount of lenses, viewfinders, rail extensions, bellows extensions, remote shutter releases, film masks, pretty much anything you can think of that will go on a medium format SLR camera can be removed from this camera and then replaced with an optional third-party accessory. So moving on to the operation of the camera, the first thing you will notice is that it utilizes a rail and bellows focus system, not unlike the Mamiya RZ67, a better camera in every possible way compared to the Fujifilm GX680 III S Professional. The reason it utilizes this rail and bellows focus system is that it allows for extremely fine focusing and also extremely macro photography. This is the reason extensions were sold for the bellows and the rails, because this camera was made specifically for product and portrait photography, which means that you need to be able to focus on subjects extremely close to your camera. Also, on the focusing rail, you will notice this little lever here. This is used to increase the friction on the rail system for focusing. This allows for finer focus, and you can even lock it all the way back, which does not allow you to move the focus and locks the focus in place. Very useful. Moving on to the lens, it can be removed from the top of the camera by pushing up on this lever here. And you can see on the right side, you have your aperture control. This is mirrored on the top of the lens as well. There is an aperture preview lever right here, so it'll preview the aperture. And you will also notice that on the left side of the lens, there are electrical connectors. This is because the shutter is an electronic shutter, and also every single time you take a photo on this camera, the number of shots is recorded for each separate component, the body, the film back, and the lens. So the lens has built-in memory that allows it to remember which shutter count it has. Moving on to the body of the camera, we have all of the controls for actually taking pictures. We have the switch that determines what photo mode you're going to be using, single, continuous, or multiple exposures down here at the bottom. You have the shutter dial right here. It goes from shutter speeds of 400 all the way down to 8 seconds, and also includes a bulb mode. Down here we have the shutter button itself, which is incredibly light, and I'll talk about how annoying this is later in the video. Down here we have the flash port, flash button, mirror lockup, and remote shutter release port. That's right, this camera does not have a standard threaded shutter release. Instead, Fujifilm sold an optional electronic shutter release, which is now expensive as on eBay, and is the reason why I have a very difficult time taking long exposures, because Fujifilm did not want me to be able to do this on the cheap. Up here on the top of the camera, we have a status LCD. It shows the battery level for only the body. It shows a blinking triangle with an exclamation point, which tells you that your camera is not ready to take a picture. And you also have a little button right here to light up the LCD, and makes an incredibly annoying buzzing sound whenever you do it. Over here on the right side, we have a bubble level, And here we have the waist level viewfinder, which has two masks which are correlating to the portrait or landscape composure that you're using with your film back, which is pretty handy. You also have a pop-up magnifier. These two buttons here on the side release the viewfinder so you can attach your myriad of optional viewfinders, which are extremely hard to find and extremely expensive whenever you do find them. So let's be honest, we're going to continue using waist level viewfinder. Moving on to the left side of the body, we have a panel that can be unlocked here. And you have your AC input here because yes, this camera is completely electronic and needs power to run. And finally, on the bottom of the camera, we have two thread sizes, 1/4 and 1/3 thread. And we also have the battery compartment, which houses 3 CR123A batteries, a very niche battery that is hard to find, and if you do find them in stores, they're expensive as And keep in mind, these batteries are only for the operation of the body. That's right, the film back uses different types of batteries. Finally, moving on to the most annoying part of this camera, we have the film back. On the top here, we have a status LCD. You can see here that it shows the number of shots you have left taken. It shows an overview of the camera components and which ones are ready to use. Over here, we have the things that will be printed on each slide whenever a picture is taken. This feature is actually pretty handy because instead of having to write down your exposure values that you use for shutter speed and aperture, it will print them on the photo itself. And finally, over here, we have the ISO setting. There is a detector inside the film back which will automatically scan and detect the ISO of your film and put in that value. Or alternatively, you can manually input the value. You can push down on this lever and open it up, which allows you to take out the film winder system and load up some new film. You can see here I have some HP5 that was completely up during this shoot while I was unloading and loading it. Finally, down here at the bottom of the film back, you can push in this button and turn the entire film back to portrait mode, so you can shoot in portrait instead of having to turn your camera sideways like some f***ing jackass. You can also turn this the other way and completely remove the film back. So now that we've got all that boring shit out of the way, let's talk about the reason why I bought this camera. Well, the only good reason I can come up with is that I'm actually f***ing insane. I'm on drugs. I was tired of shooting with my Hasselblad 500cm. That's right, I sold my Hasselblad 500cm, one of the most sought after medium format cameras, and one that literally went to the f***ing moon for this ginormous piece of shit. So why would I do that? Well, I wanted more of a challenge when I was shooting film, and I wanted a different format besides 6x6 because honestly, that square was getting a little constrictive. It did not allow you to think inside the box. In fact, you had to only think inside the box in order to take a good photo with the Hasselblad. And while there are millions of good photos that have been taken with the Hasselblads, I just wanted something that shot in a different format and would be more of a challenge to shoot. So instead of taking the logical step to a Mamiya RZ67, which is substantially larger than the Hasselblad, and also shoots in that good, oh so hallowed 6x7 format that the film gods love to shoot with, I decided to do something even more ridiculous and go with a camera that shoots in 6x8 because I thought that that would be fun. Little did I know that this was going to be probably the most regrettable decision I've made in my camera purchasing history. So the real difficulty that comes with shooting with this camera is the fact that it's so large. It literally weighs the weight of a newborn child, coming in at around 8.8 pounds, and it is also about the size and dimensions of a cinder block. So people who claim that their cameras feel like bricks whenever they shoot with them have absolutely nothing on this camera because it is literally the size of a cinder block. So it is definitely challenging to shoot with. It also gives you a completely unique experience when shooting with because of the fact that it has an auto film winding feature. That's right, you don't get to wind the film on this yourself, you have to let some fancy gears do it for you. Everything on this camera is incredibly automated, but that also means it's incredibly loud. Just listen to the sound it makes whenever you take a picture. So something that just happened whenever I tried to take a picture in order to show the incredibly loud shutter sound, the camera refused to take a picture because on the actual camera itself, in the layout in the back where it shows all the components and whether or not they're ready to shoot, Sometimes it just decides that it doesn't think it wants to take a picture. It was telling me that my lens was not hooked up correctly, and it was not recognizing that there was a lens on the camera. So I had to remove the lens multiple times and force it back on there in order to get just the right connection in order to actually take a picture. We're gonna do the shutter sound right now, by the way. So overall, this camera is probably one of the hardest ones I have ever used in my entire life. It is meant to sit on a tripod in a studio and take pictures of porcelain china and extremely overpaid models. But yet, I have it here in Oklahoma, of all places, trying to do landscape and portrait street photography with it. So yes, it was an extremely bad decision for the type of environments I am trying to shoot in, but I wanted something that would be a challenge, and I've definitely found out that this will be quite a challenge when I'm shooting with it. Regardless, I've managed to make some pretty good photos with it so far. Nothing I could really consider good because none of the photos I typically take are good, but photos that are interesting nonetheless. The camera has an extreme amount of quirks and is extremely hard to use. I've also run into an issue where I have a light leak which I cannot figure out the source of. I thought it was happening whenever I turned the film back to portrait mode whenever I didn't have the dark slide in. But I later found out that this was not the issue because I tried to reproduce this and I did not have those same issues in full light. So I have no fucking clue why it's been leaking light onto my images in these weird ways. It's kind of cool, but at the same time, I only get 9 shots per roll, and when 8 of those shots are ruined by light leaks, it's pretty annoying. Oh, and the shutter button as well. If you turn the camera to the single exposure and you hit the shutter button extremely lightly, you will take a photo. And if you are readjusting your camera to take another photo and you leave it on the single exposure mode, it is extremely easy to accidentally brush your thumb against it and take a photo. I cannot tell you how many times I've already taken accidental photos, and that is especially sad whenever I only get 9 photos per roll. So overall, it's not a very fun camera to use. It's extremely difficult to use, and it has an extremely steep learning curve. Probably the only thing I think that could justify me purchasing this was the fact that I wanted something that would be challenging to me to shoot, and also, incredibly, the price. But now, since studios are starting to realize that digital is the future, they are selling off all these old, shitty medium format film cameras that really are niche and have no other use in the modern day film market. So you can find them really cheap on eBay. I got this one for $445, but plus shipping and taxes, it came out to about $610, which is pretty cheap all things considered for a 6x8 medium format film camera that has so many features. Of course, if you're thinking about buying one of these yourself, I would encourage you to rethink your decision and every other life decision you have also made, because it is a terrible choice and will only lead to further heartache in your life and the destruction of any friendships you currently have. I'm sorry, Abby, the camera comes first. Either way, if I would have to rate this camera, I would rate it as don't buy it, it doesn't even need a rating. But if you want something that is extremely hard to shoot with and extremely difficult to use and will bring you no joy, I would recommend buying this camera, because in that case, you're probably as masochistic as I am. Thanks for watching. This has been a waste of film. Stay tuned for more videos about this terrible medium format camera. I've currently taken on 2 trips to Colorado and California over winter break and took quite a few photos, and we'll be making videos soon outlining those trips and how terrible the camera performed while we were there.